Welcome everybody to the Gold Split. I am Daddy Peanut 3D, better known as Peanut. This show is brought to you by Lzuruha. We are here with Feasel, who many of you may know from the many AGDQ rounds he's done in the past few years. One of the preeminent speedrunners of what we do. He runs an obnoxious amount of games, has a world record in an even larger number of that. How you doing tonight?
Great, thank you. It's great to be here.
We appreciate you taking some time out, let viewers a little bit further inside. I know streaming's a very personable thing, but this just kind of gives us a chance to ask some of the bigger questions that maybe are a little more difficult to answer while you're running a game or just streaming.
All right, sure.
So I'll ask you the same question I ask everybody else when I start. How did you get started in speedrunning?
Wow. Well, I mean, I spent, my whole life playing video games, and I was really into NES games as a kid. And sometime around in college, I dug out my old NES and I started playing some of the games I had. And I just used to leave the games on and just see, how many times I could beat them in a row. I started out with Contra, really the first game that I worked on seriously, and I first wanted to see how many times I could get through it on the lives that they start you with, and eventually I started caring about how fast I was going, and this was probably around 2006, 2007 maybe, so speedrunning was out there, it existed on the internet, and people were doing it, and people were, running some of the same games that I was playing, but I didn't really know much about the community. I eventually got in contact with SDA. I just found some runs on the internet that pointed me towards that, and I realized there's a whole community of people doing it, and it all kind of just snowballed from there ever since.
Gotcha. So you're one of the interesting ones that's been doing it since before streaming was really a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I started in probably 2007, really seriously speedrunning, and it wasn't until I went to Classic Games Done Quick, which I think was 2010, if I'm not mistaken, and that was the first that I had really even realized that streaming was a thing. It didn't even occur to me that people would, broadcast themselves playing games. Like, I didn't even get that. And I had already been, making speed runs and submitting them to SDA and whatnot for, several years up to that point. But yeah, it was really with the Classic Games Done Quick marathon that it sort of dawned on me what, speedrunning can be besides just, you sitting there with a, DVD recorder and a Nintendo.
Oh, for sure. That's I think a lot of people would agree with that. I mean, it's strange when you stumble across which was Justin TV, now Twitch TV, and see a lot of people doing the same thing that you're doing, or like you said, going to a marathon. Like, wow, all these people really want to watch this and donate to this or what have you. It's kind of an interesting phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And I guess it's interesting because I think a lot of people now are starting to recognize speedrunning. Speedrunning used to just be the community of speedrunners used to just be the people who did speedruns. There weren't, simply speedrun fans. Everyone had their own games that they were working on, and they kind of, collaborated and cross-pollinated ideas and whatnot. But it's interesting. The more of these GDQ marathons that I go to, the more I see people who are just there to meet the runners, to watch the speed runs, and who are just interested in the speedrun culture. And I think that's really cool that it's something that's become accessible to people besides just the small niche culture that started it. So
And I think you notice that carrying over. I mean, I've been watching. I always watch a lot of streams, and I'm noticing that, especially after a GDQ, you notice a lot of people not only getting into speedrunning, but a lot more people casually watching just the normal runner streams. Like, yours, for example, you'll see people in there that maybe don't really even know what's going on or even really why they're there, I guess you could say, but they're asking the questions that are getting everyone started.
hmm yeah, and it's interesting how speedrunning when you add the audience component of it, the viewer component of it, it's speedrunning is actually even more about really a community, I guess, interacting with other people and trading ideas than it is just a solo sport. I mean, especially because of streaming. And I think that basically you have to be a good speedrunner. It's not just about being good at the games. It's, I guess, about knowing, who to talk to who to help you with problems and figuring out the games. And part of it is also just being good at commentating, just explaining what you're doing, because there are people who are interested and people want to know, or they're curious about what you do, and everybody loves to talk about the things they're passionate about, and this crazy knowledge that they have of very specific things. What else are you going to do with that knowledge besides make speed runs, but explain it to other people and help them enjoy the speed runs? So it's a whole other aspect of it, the streaming ads.
Well, I think that was a big part of what drew me in there. I mean, I run Super Metroid and started when Garrison ran, I think in SGDQ 2013,
Mm-hmm.
and that not only got me into that, like, well, I really want to see if I can beat this game that way, but you stumble across 12 other people that are kind of doing the same thing, and like you said, it would be infinitely harder to try and figure this stuff out without a community, without other people to bounce ideas off of and things like that. So I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and it's pretty neat. It's interesting that you mentioned Garrison. He was one of the streamers that I watched the most when I first got into watching streams. And Super Metroid was one of the first games that really had me fascinated with, games that were super optimized, or at least they seemed super optimized at the time. I guess compared to what people are doing now, it's, you know, if only the people of the past had known what was in store. But it got me really fascinated just to see, sort of the limits of what can happen when you have a game that's had, because Super Metroid had people working on that from way back. I mean, Super Metroid and Metroid Prime were games that were among the first to show up on Speed Demos Archive, and we had the M2K2 community, and that was already a game that benefited from having lots of minds put together working on it, borrowing each other's strategies, etc. So yeah, Super Metroid's a perfect example.
Well, that's the exciting part. I mean, who would have thought, I mean, even 2 years ago, that we would be nearly breaking the 43-minute barrier of a Super Metroid run.
Hmm.
I mean, you can look back at those. You look at Zost as a good example. His 100% run at AGDQ last year, I think that was last year, was almost, it looked almost perfect when you watched it. It was like, wow, this is amazing, and he's doing this at a marathon. They're 2 minutes faster than that now. I mean,
Right, exactly. It's crazy because you don't. It's hard to even see where that comes from. Every time I see a game and I think, oh man, that's just perfect. There's no getting anywhere from here. This is basically the end. Let's put this in the Hall of Fame and be done with it. And then you look back, a year later, and people have discovered all these new tricks. It's really just a product of having so many people working on it and trading ideas and having really good tools. I guess when I first started out, I mean, I was really into emulators. When I first started out, I would always do all my routing and practicing on emulators. And now that just the emulators are getting better, the tools are getting better, like memory searching and filtering, reverse engineering the way the algorithms work. All those tools have improved, and it's kind of taken speedrunning to this whole level. I mean, notice like in the past year, think of all the games that suddenly have developed credits warps, this like warp to end
right.
credits. And I expect that any day now, pretty much any game I can think of, it wouldn't surprise me if someone came in and said, oh yeah, I got a 3-minute run because I found a warped credits. It's just as the tools get better, that kind of thing is going to happen more and more.
Well, I think you see people, that are running these games that are. Super Metroid's another good example of that. That was probably about 5-6 months ago when they started finding, space-time glitching and beating the game in 7 minutes and wrong warping through floors with super missiles. And I'm watching this like, I have no idea what's going on, but I can't stop watching.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. And especially with a game like a single player game, there's not a lot of ways to add replay value to it. That's why I always really enjoyed speedrunning, because it used to be I'd beat a game and then I'd be like, all right, that's good. I can add this to my list of games that I've beaten, and then I'm done with it. But speedrunning is just like a whole like new level of replay value. And even a game that you've seen plenty of times. I mean, Super Metroid's been around. Everyone's played that game, seen that game for years. But, when something can be done in the game that fascinates people who are, already completely familiar with the game, that's pretty amazing. That there's, still can come up with new fascinating things that we haven't seen before.
And you're right. It's your feelings for the game, whether they keep going downward, the excitement level. But then, I mean, I keep referring to Super Metroid, but I can still remember a couple months ago when I came home and saw Sinister was broadcasting a new world record run for Super Metroid. I said, "Oh, this is cool. I'll watch this." And it was Behemoth's run, obviously the first 43, where he
Hmm.
went the entirely different way, and I was hooked all over again. I couldn't move from my couch. I couldn't stop watching it.
Right, it's interesting. These big events will happen that kind of shake things up, like a route change in a game. I was surprised to see that the Soten record got beaten not once but twice, just in the past week or so, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
it's
been
and that's another game that every time I see the run get improved, I think, wow, I didn't think that that was going to happen, but I guess by now I should be expecting it.
well. That's the part I love. I myself I've discovered an inherent weakness of myself in speedrunning is that I don't know if I don't know how to say this the right way, but I don't think like that. I can't see these new optimizations before they do. I mean, I'm more of a I'm going to take what somebody else has done and try to do it better type person, but I like you said, without the internet and this community that we're a part of, I don't think it would be anywhere near what it is today.
Right. Yeah, and people have different roles. There are people who like to make speed runs or to actually do the speed runs, and there are some people who just enjoy glitch finding, who just enjoy puzzle solving, who just enjoy, reversing algorithms. There's like room for all kinds of different, niche duties that people, want to take on, and I think it's pretty cool that there are people who are just interested in finding new techniques and, showing them to the runners so that they can make better world record runs.
That brings me to my next thing I was going to say. That's what drew me to your stream. To be honest, the first time I watched you a couple years ago, you were routing Zelda 2, which I've obviously seen people route games hundreds of times, but it was the way that you were doing it that drew me in. You were reading from, I would assume, were your own notes, and just the way you were explaining it in such a scientific way. We have to follow this algorithm of this guy dropping this pea bag, or this won't happen. 30 minutes from now, we won't have enough points to do this, and that's one of my favorite games. I've been playing that game since I was 5, and I've never heard of it explained that way, and it was incredible.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I really, that's my favorite part about games, really. That's kind of what got me into speedrunning is not so much well, I mean, somewhat, improving your motor skills and just getting good at something, but I've always been a puzzle solver. I've always liked to solve logic puzzles. I've always liked optimizing things, or improving procedures for stuff. And I'm a programmer, when I went to school for computer science and math. And so that's sort of like the way I try to approach problems. I sort of take speedrunning as an engineering problem. It's a clearly defined goal. You have these tools to work with, and you put together a plan. And I always say that the greatest tool for a speedrun is a spreadsheet. I mean, that's pretty much the answer to getting better at most things is organizing what you know about it and coming up with a strategy.
Right.
And I mean, you're really solving an engineering problem in exactly the same way.
So tell me this: you run a lot more games than most general speedrunners would run, and I mean, most of us play 10, 15, 20 games that we would consider speedrunning, quote unquote. But
Right.
you hold world records in a dozen plus of these games.
Yeah, I mean, it goes up and down because, the more games that you work on, the less you're going to be able to, hold on to all of the records. It takes continued effort to maintain a record in something, but I definitely like to jump around, and I've played a lot of games. Over the years, I've probably had records in a couple dozen at some point or another. I probably still have somewhere about in the range of 10 or so of the, maybe not the most contested NES games, but, stuff that other people have run before.
A world record's a world record. That's how I
Well,
always
yeah.
look at it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's the idea of taking the game to the extreme, and even a run that's I used to be all about world records, like let's just get a world record and everything. But now I guess at this point I'm sort of happy with coming up with a plan for a game and then getting a run that sort of like stands alone and you can, watch it and enjoy it, and it's like a piece of art. It doesn't necessarily even have to be the top time in the world, but a nice clean run that uses the strats and everything that you planned happens as you planned it. So when someone's watching the video, they really sort of see the actual implementation of what you were trying to do. I've really enjoyed sort of putting speedruns together just sort of as a piece of art, I think.
Oh, that
And
makes sense. That's definitely a different side of the coin that I think a lot of people don't think of, but I mean that's a beautiful way to look at it, really, is, it is an art form, putting into effect things that you've seen or have thought up, and that's it's always a good feeling to be able to accomplish that type of thing.
yeah, I mean, it's really like a collection of a bunch of different ideas and, some ideas that you borrowed, some that you invented. There's a lot of creativity because there's just so many different ways that you can run a game optimally or plan for, different contingencies. And when you actually put it all together, the thing itself is just a really, I mean, it's just a really cool thing that I like to, I would like to sort of get across, all the thinking that went into it. I always enjoyed writing author comments for things. When you submit something to SDA, you
Hmm.
explain, you get to explain everything. That was always my favorite part about running, is that I would, get to really like explain all the thought that went into it.
And I, for one, enjoy that type of thing. As I was learning Super Metroid, I'd come across tricks that I've seen done 100 times. Alcatraz is a good example if you're familiar. The couple jump there, but as I tried to do it over and over and over and over, I couldn't feel what they were doing. I couldn't feel my way through it. But reading a concise explanation, not just watching it on video, is what does it for me. I can get things that way. They're just, it's a different way of looking at it, just a different brain, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because there are some speedruns that I think you can really tell what's going on just by watching it. It's just pretty self-explanatory. And sometimes, you'll see something and just the visual representation of it does not at all tell you the person's actually doing or what goes into it. And sometimes tricks look really easy. Oh, you just run over there and jump and you make it. But, when you try to do it yourself, you realize this is,
Right.
this is impossible. But but yeah, I mean, really, what goes behind the run itself is more important in some sense. And also, the interesting thing about speedrunning is, when you get a record or a recorded run of any kind, you're seeing one possible path through it. But I mean, if a real speedrunner has got all kinds of different branches in mind of, if this happens, I do this. If I'm this number of seconds ahead, I'll do the safe strat or I'll risk it here. There's like a whole, set of different possibilities of the way that run could go. And to really like explain the full thing of what your speed run is, it takes more than just one video of it. In fact, that's kind of why I like watching people stream sometimes, is because you don't know, you don't know from just watching the finished product what actually went into it. But when you get to see them doing attempt after attempt and seeing, what parts they're bad at or where they're taking risks and getting lucky or where, things aren't going their way and what their contingency plans are, you get to see like a whole lot more. It's like a lot deeper experience now when you can actually see people doing attempts live than rather than just see the run that they eventually post to YouTube.
Oh, that makes sense. So, speaking of Twitch and streaming and things like that, I mean, you're you're one of the larger streams of Twitch as far as speedrunning goes. I know that, at least I don't know how to say that.
Relatively, I guess.
It's, yeah, you're at the good point, I think. I mean, there's obviously streams that are smaller, there's streams that are bigger, but I'd say you're doing just fine. You're a well recognized stream in the speedrun community. Did you expect that kind of growth and, I guess, notoriety, for lack of a better term, when you started streaming?
Um, I really didn't like when I started streaming. There really weren't speedrunners who were getting. Well, I mean, I started back in the Ustream days before we jumped to Justin TV, and then from there to Twitch TV. And the speedrunning was a real like subculture of a subculture then, and you weren't getting, even if you were top of your game playing a fairly popular game, you weren't going to be getting hundreds of viewers. And I think over time, all of the numbers, like the viewership numbers of everyone's streams, has sort of gradually gone up. So in some sense, I sort of, kind of, you can kind of see that happen as each GDQ happens, and then you like watch the viewership numbers on people's streams for the next couple months, you see they're boosted. So I mean, I sort of expected a sort of ratchet effect where, every time, a new event happens, everyone's viewership kind of goes up a little. But I guess, there have been some times when I've been at like, 1,800 viewers, and I don't think I ever could have anticipated having, 4 digits of people watching me back when I started out. I mean, I started out with 10 people in the stream, so it is definitely a surprise, and I don't even know what causes it sometimes. Sometimes you'll just be on a roll and playing the right games, and people will just kind of come to your stream. I don't know. It still kind of baffles me sometimes when I get a lot of viewers, or when I don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I've had streams with obviously 0 people watching, or I've had streams where I've been rated or something like that, where I have 170 people watching, and that's the part I could never really figure out is those people don't really seem to leave. They're there, they're chatting, they're enjoying everything, and then I get off stream and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, where are these people every other day when I'm streaming? They seem to have a good time. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll be streaming and it'll be like 5:30 in the morning, and I'll have more viewers than, I would get playing at 9 p.m., doing almost exactly the same thing. And it's just, sometimes it's kind of random. It depends on, what else is on, and, how similar the other big streams are to what you're doing. But I mean, really, it's just the fact that I've been streaming for a long time, I think eventually adds up. I mean, it's really tough, I think, for people when they're starting out, seeing these streams that are getting, 200 viewers, 500 viewers, 1,000 viewers, and thinking, man, how do I ever get to that point? I'm at 11 viewers all the time. But really, it's just over time, things just gradually get bigger.
Right, and it's you can see that. I mean, we see a lot of, like you said, the watching the big people, or not really the big people, like the popular runs from AGDQ, and watching them grow. Like my example again, Super Metroid, surprise, but the 4-way race of Super Metroid at AGDQ.
Oh yeah.
Those, I mean, Gary was already pretty decent size. A lot of people know who he was. Zost grew exponentially after that, as did Ivan. Krauser, I don't think Krauser cares if he gets viewers. It's hard for me to figure that out, but...
Right, sure. Yeah, and I remember that one, Zallard had his run, and we looked at his the number of followers he gained after that, after that appearance, and it was just this huge spike. Yeah, and it's interesting. These GDQs have really changed things. Like, I'd say that's one of the biggest things. I mean, the idea of streaming, adding streaming to speedrunning, that was a big thing. And then the GDQs, like, nice job, Mike Uyama, for anticipating this and getting and making it happen, because I feel like this kind of thing is something that would eventually happen, and I'm really glad that it started when it did.
I mean, that's AGDQ and SGDQ, the whole, really the idea of a charity marathon involving video games is such. I mean, you go back 5-6 years ago, and it's like, really, that's not going to do much. But you look at what that does now. I mean, it raises millions of dollars every year,
right?
And
it's
incredible.
It exceeds expectations every time.
Yeah, every year. So I think I did an interview right before AGDQ, and what was talked about was, well, it's going to be hard to keep up what we're doing every year, but it does. I mean, you have, like you said, you have the mainstream public, the regular news networks talking about this type of thing, whereas usually it's video games are bad for us and our children, we should get rid of them, to video games are actually doing something decent for the community.
Right. Or if you see somebody playing a game that was made more than 15 years ago, it's all like, wow, these guys are playing old games. Can you believe that? But now I think people, even just looking past, just the sheer novelty of seeing people, seeing adults playing, a kid's game system that was made in the 80s or something, and they sort of move past that and are seeing it as a sport, and really recognizing that people are, training hard to be able to achieve the levels that they're at, and trying to beat other people at it, and just like exceeding everyone's expectations. And it's pretty it's pretty cool to see that speedrunning really is being recognized as the sport it is. So I mean, the GDQs have helped a lot. I think Speedruns Live has helped a lot. That was another huge event in the development of speedrunning, is when that idea of live racing started. So I mean, another
Definitely.
great thing.
And you can see the effect of AGDQs on those races. I mean, the Friday night race of Super Metroid anytime after a GDQ is just ridiculous. I mean, you have 50, 60 people coming together, like you said, to race a 25-year-old game,
Right.
with no money involved necessarily, just bragging rights, and
Just bragging rights,
it's good to
exactly.
see that. I mean, there's not a lot of that left in the world, I think, and that's a good thing for people to. It's a safe outlet for people, I think.
Yeah, and if you think about it, some of these games would probably have been lost to history if there wasn't this. I mean, people do appreciate a lot of the, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, etc., but there's a lot of other games that, don't really have the whole main series thing going for them that keeps, that would keep them in the public's attention. And yet now there are people who are, in their teens who are picking up games that were made before they were born and, keeping these games alive and really, it's really cool to see that, because there were a lot of great things that aren't going to become obsolete because there is an actual thing to do with these games. What do you do with a game like Deadly Towers besides make jokes about it until it's too old for people to even remember what it means? But now someone can actually go back and play it, and there's a reason to do it, and a reason to try to do it better.
Oh, I run Fester's Quest, so I can
There you
I can
go.
relate to that.
Exactly. That one would be lost to history. People would be like, Fester's Quest, what does that even mean? But now, because people play it and watch people play it, it's going to stay around for a long time.
Well, I think that's really the point of all this, is really just it's establishing history and it's keeping things alive, which really need to be notated. I mean, they didn't have this kind of stuff in the '80s. Well, they probably maybe they did. Maybe that was a thing, but it wasn't anything any of us have heard of, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty much all we got for that. I mean, what's the future hold for you? Any big plans we need to hear about?
Oh man, I'm always terrible about making longer term plans. I have lists and lists of speedrun projects that I want to do, or of speedrun related projects that I want to do. I'm really enjoying currently my role as making Speed Gaming League happen and making Sunday Sequence Break happen. Organizing other people to do video game related stuff with me. I'm enjoying that. I'm sort of branching out into that from just the solo speedrunning thing. But I don't know. That's what I'd like to, in addition to keeping my own stream going, work more on that.
Well, that's good to hear. I think all your viewers will be happy to hear that they'll be able to find you in more places. Speaking of that, let everybody know where they can find you. I think you have your own website, you have a Twitter, Facebook, Twitch. You mentioned Sunday Sequence Break.
Sure, yeah. Well, my website's feasel.org. Right now, there's just things on it that support stuff on my stream, FAQ stuff, and Final Fantasy for when I eventually get back to Final Fantasy 1. The Sunday Sequence Break is tssbreak.com. You can get all the links to the runs and the runners that we talk about in the show, links to finding the channel, etc. And Speed Gaming League, our website for that is speedgaming.tv, and you can see the results from past matches, sign up to help out, etc. But yeah, I'm doing Speed Gaming League every Saturday afternoon and Sunday Sequence Break every Sunday night.
Busy man. Well, folks, I think that's about all the time we have. Thank you, Feasel, again for taking some time out of your Monday night to do this with us.
No problem.
And you're seeing this on YouTube, so I assume you know where you're looking at it. For those of you who may be seeing this somewhere else, it's www.youtube/Lzuruha Media. This is brought to you by LZH, a speed gaming community as well. So if you did like this video, show your support, like, subscribe, leave a comment on there leave one for Feasel, or let us know who you maybe want to see as an interview next. Other than that, any shout outs?
Oh, I want to shout out my TSSB bros, Flicky, PJ, Gildersneeze, Duckfist, Arcano, Green K4. And shout outs to Mythical 9 for helping me make SGL happen.
All right, folks, we're out of here. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.